Evening and welcome to the Info Circuit. My name is Matthew Seeley and it is a pleasure to be joining you this evening for episode 13 of the Info Circuit. Happy New Year. It's a bit late in the month to be saying it, but Happy New Year nonetheless. If you're joining us live this evening, please let us know where you are. So we are here for an interesting one because it's 2026. It's the start of a new year. People are buying electric vehicles and things are coming in with what is going on and where things are at. So it is a fitting time, we think, to have a conversation about where things are at and what is going on at the minute. So I have a bit of a slide deck put together. I'm going to try keep it as open as possible, and people have questions. I think that's the most important thing. If people have questions, to come on and ask the questions and we shall get into it. We are going to say this is episode 13, by the way. So we're on our 13th episode of the Info Circuit. So it is a pleasure to have you here this evening. Gamer Trojan, good evening. How are you? It's great to have you here joining us this evening. And anyone else, let us know where you are and join in and say hello. So let's kick things off. Let's make some assumptions about our chat today. What do I mean by that? So let's get things simply put. We're on about a new EV and we're talking about post what you have done in terms of getting to the point where you're already buying the car that you're going to buy. So that's the first thing. And what do I mean by that, I suppose? You've watched Derek's videos. You've done your research on what is available on the Facebook group or from independent reading that you've done, be it evdatabase.org for ranges and what vehicles are like, be it what is happening around the place in terms of other people that you know that may have a vehicle and what's going on there. So we're not going to focus quite so much on what is happening in terms of you as an individual and where you're picking things up and what to do there. We're making the assumption that you've already decided what it is you are going to buy. So we're at that point where you're moving on from that point in time on. So to kick things off, where do we start with all of this? So the first thing we want to talk about is the handover checklist. And what I put together here is going to be the biggest wordy slide I have in the whole slide deck here. So after this, it gets much nicer to look at for everybody here. But this is the one with the most info that we've written down because it just felt the best way of putting it for what is going on here. So small focus on new EVs, but this also works with second-hand EVs. And the first thing to say is inspect the vehicle. And I say, yes, even a new vehicle. I have had conversations with people in the past where they've had a new vehicle and when they've gone in to collect it, something isn't quite right. So be it something like in final, detailing of the car, something has happened where a bit of paint has gotten a chip, or a new vehicle when it's been on a transport truck and something has happened to it on the way and it wasn't spotted up until the time that you were getting there. So it's important to take the time, have a look around the vehicle, see what it's like, check it out to make sure that everything is, in the basic stuff right for you to take it and go with it on that day. The next thing we would say is sit in it, get comfortable, and adjust the basics to your liking. We know this is a basic one that people should say and do, but if it's possibly your first electric vehicle, this is an important one to have where you have all those basics set up and right for you to be able to operate the vehicle. And again, with that, you're in the dealership, you're talking to the individuals there. The important aspect of all of this is to actually be there and kind of go, well, what are the bits I do need to know? How do I adjust it? So software on wheels is kind of where we're coming to with vehicles at this point in time. Is it as simple as adjusting the passenger side mirrors with a switch on the console on the door, or is it something that's buried in a screen that happens to be much harder to get to? Or is it something they're used to? So it's very important to spend a little bit of time and take a look at these things. So get comfortable with the vehicle, understand what's going on that way. The next thing is to kind of say with an EV is what are you actually getting with it on the day? So previously that wouldn't have been as much of an issue that maybe there was floor mats in the car. That was about it. Maybe that might have come with the vehicle. But nowadays, charging cables is an important part of it. What do you get? Is it just charging cables? Is it the right one? We've had incidents in the past where people have come along and had the issue where the cable they had was actually the wrong one for their vehicle. So 3-phase and single phase, which we'll get onto a little bit more as we go through this. But depending on what your vehicle is, have you got the right cable? Ask the question, check it and see what's there. but also things like if your vehicle has vehicle to load, and is it supposed to come with an adapter? So BYD, as far as I'm aware, off the top of my head, will give you an adapter with the vehicle. It's part of the cost of the vehicle up front, and or it should be there, but it is an important thing to check. Other vehicles and other manufacturer OEMs may do similar in terms of having vehicle to load, but they might not actually have that as part of what is the new vehicle handover. Again, checking how can you charge the vehicle. If it's your, again, first EV, if it's coming into it, how do you charge it on AC? How do you charge it on DC? This is all a learning curve for a lot of people, and trying to get that right for yourself is an important aspect. So take the time, ask the question. Is it a case of opening the charge port from outside, pushing the side of it, or is there something interior to the car to open it up? Making sure you know to open up the additional DC cover if the AC is open when the flap opens on the charge port. We've seen people and individuals, and I've met them myself, where they're trying to charge a vehicle and they're coming up trying to plug in a CCS, and they haven't realized that this additional port has to be opened up for them to be able to use it. And the other thing is to check what percentage has the vehicle got at that point in time when you leave. Is it enough to get you home? Simple thing, but it's just making sure you have it. And with that, do you need any apps for the vehicle itself? So what apps do you need to operate the vehicle? Be it key. So some of the modern vehicles have it actually where you can set up your mobile phone with the app to actually operate as the key. But also, is it just a case of it's nice to have the telemetrics that come with it? So what is the state of charge? We'll get into apps, but state of charge, battery level, can you preheat it, all that sort of stuff. Getting that bit of information before you leave is important. And then the last one we will say here before you leave the forecourt is, do you understand the drive modes and how to operate the safety features such as ADAS or the other maybe autonomous driving aspects that maybe there are different levels of self-driving that are coming? Being comfortable is important. It will be a change. Definitely, again, in the past, people have come from petrol or diesel vehicles, and all of a sudden the accelerator is very sharp in comparison to what they're used to in the past. And they're kind of, it feels like the vehicle is very jerky when they're taking it away. Part of that is maybe the drive mode. Part of that is just getting used to the vehicle and how it actually operates and is different in that regard. So there are kind of simple enough things, but they're important things to have right just before you get going to see what is going on with it. So with that, we come to charging 101 as being the next aspect as to, if you're new to this, what is the aspect and what is going on behind charging, and how do you look at it from that perspective? So there's a number of things that you can look at, but we'll simplify things in the grand aspect of things. If you're buying a new vehicle, type 2 is your AC home charging. Combined charging system, which is the image in the center of it all here, is what we call CCS, and that is typically what is new vehicles. On the right hand side is a CHAdeMO, and that's what would have been used on a Nissan Leaf or a Mitsubishi Outlander plug-in hybrids. They would have been used on those vehicles. Now, no new vehicle at this point in time should be coming with a CHAdeMO port, but it's important to know that that's the DC charger on those older vehicles. And the Type 1, again, on the older Nissan Leaf and Mitsubishi Outlander, is a kind of a round plug with a little tab at the top. So on that side of things. But for what is happening here now, if you're looking at a new EV 261 reg, or even from last year on, pretty much at this point in time, you're looking at a Type 2 port on the left-hand side, which is your AC home charger. And then on the center, the CCS charger, which is actually the Type 2 on the top, and then the two large DC pins on the bottom. And that is your connectivity to the world. The next big thing is charging. So how long is it going to take you to charge that vehicle? That's the one where people are not quite sure as to what it is like. So looking at AC first, which is the Type 2 plug that you have in your home or on street parking, as it would be around your cities and in maybe in work. That's typically what you'll find in work. So there's a number of different levels. The vehicle or the charge point will be the limiting factor depending on how it goes into it. So what does that mean? So if you start at the top of the table with the wall plug at 2.3 kilowatts, that is what is known as the 3-pin plug. So it's like a standard 13 amp plug that goes in with a max rating of 10 amp on the unit itself. and that charges at 2.3 kilowatts. Now, what I'm showing here in the table is a Volkswagen ID4, which is the best-selling car, electric vehicle in Ireland last year. And if you look at the table, it takes 39 hours and 30 minutes to fill that vehicle using a wall plug at 2.3 kilowatts. So very, very slow. So the vehicle can take faster, but the wall plug itself is the limiting factor here. If we look at the next two, one phase 16 amp and one phase 32 amps, it steps up slightly to 3.7 kilowatts and 7.4. And 7.4 is typically what we find in Irish homes, because that is what is being done with our standard single phase electricity in our homes here. So with 7.4 kilowatts, it takes 12 hours and 15 minutes, which is a lot faster than the wall plug. Also makes it much more usable for you as an individual for what's going on there. But it is a good one to be aware that it's still not super fast, but obviously it's the type of thing where charging habits are what is something that you might have to learn or come about with, insofar as you're plugging it in the evening time, it's charging overnight while you sleep at night. The limiting factor that may come about with this is being aware of the fact that, is there enough time for your commute? If you're doing a large commute with the vehicle, does it have enough time to fully charge? So keep an eye on that when you're looking at a vehicle. The next step on this is three-phase, 16 amps and 32 amps. So again, here is where Volkswagen have it on the point where it has 11 kilowatts on three-phase on the Volkswagen ID4. That means if you were on a public charge point that is typically a 22 kilowatt charge point, you could charge at 11 kilowatts in 8 hours and 15 minutes to fill the vehicle up. So much quicker. The difference is between the 11 and 22 is it is now the vehicle that is limiting the charge. So one phase 32 amps, it is the charge point in your home or wherever it may be that limits how fast the vehicle charges. But on the 32 amp, on the three-phase 32 amp, which is the totem poles that you would see around on the public footpaths, now all of a sudden it's the vehicle that is limiting it to 11 kilowatts. So it's something to be aware of. It's the differences between the two and how you would take it. So that's AC. With that, the other aspect that we would say to this as well is a charge point is a cost. It is not part typically of the cost of the vehicle. If it is your first vehicle, it is worth investigating that before you're committing to it. So we've seen it in conversations in the last week or so where people were buying EVs, and then when they went to buy a charge point, there was a load of additional costs. Some of that is based on the fact that in an older home, the safety of the home and the charge point and the users behind it needs to be accounted for. So if upgrades are required based on the metering to the home, cabling in what needs to be done for the charge point, all that needs to be accounted for. There may be additional costs there that you need to look at and be sure of first. It's similar if people are getting solar PV or trying to upgrade their home with heat pumps, etc. All these sorts of things need to be thought about in advance. But with an EV, it is one where it's different insofar as you might buy a vehicle and then when you go to install a charge point, as we've seen recently in some conversations, that it is getting cut. So it's an important one to check and look at from that perspective. Moving on to CCS and Combo 2, as it's known officially, but CCS as everybody refers to it normally. Again, taking Volkswagen ID4 example here at this point in time, the big aspect here, as you can see, is depending on the max power, that typically the max power of the unit is, we'll say, going to limit what is going to be done with the vehicle for the most part. So you can see on the CCS 50, 100, 150, 175 and 300, as you come down through the table, the max power that each gives, it's only when you get towards the bottom of the table at 175 kilowatts that it is the charger is now giving more than the vehicle can take itself. And I think it was Xpeng with the new G6 is talking about the 5C charging, which is close to 500 kilowatts of charging being capable on the vehicle itself. So typically we see 350 kilowatt DC fast chargers in Ireland in the highest outputs at the minute. So even at that point, the vehicle itself is capable of taking more power than the charge point itself can deliver. But for the most part, this is what you're looking at. We'll come to charging curves and those sort of things in a little bit in terms of talking about what it's like at that point. But the important aspect here is to say 10 to 80% is somewhere between, half an hour or, nearly an hour and 10 minutes if you're on a 50 kilowatt DC. So yes, much faster than what is being done on your AC home charge point, but it is a 50 kilowatt unit is not going to give you a very fast time. And with that, to be aware of a overstay fee. So on the DC fast charge points, again, we're trying to keep the network open and moving for vehicles. They typically have a 45-minute time limit before overstay fees start to kick in. So if you're looking at a 50 kilowatt DC unit and you're trying to get from 10 to 80%, you may end up having to incur a fee if you're sitting on that unit for that period of time. So something to be aware of. It's not quite the same. Different charge point operators have different models and how they do things. So depending on what one you're at, it is important to know which one you are with and what fees may occur at that point in time with them. They're all different, so it is worth investigating that. But we'll come to a little bit of that in the app section in a while. So with that, apps, what does that look like for people? And Gamer Trojan, I just spotted your comment. Don't forget your new green number plate. So for people who are unaware, the green flash was introduced last year on the side of the license plates, done in a way to indicate the new electric vehicles that are on the road. So fully electric vehicles will have this green flash on the side of the license plate. It's a very noticeable mark. I was commenting with Derek and the guys, and we had a call last week on the committee call, and I was kind of going, it's the type thing where in the car park and work, even on a wet, rainy day, and you're walking kind of with your head down just to get to your car to go home, it's very noticeable when you see the flash on the side. So you can notice the new vehicles that are there because of it. Some people like it, some people don't. It's just part of what is there coming, but it is a nice thing to have in some ways. So apps. These are the apps that I have on my phone. That's where the screen grab has come from, is showing the two little sections that I have in my folder on my phone for apps that I use now. Interesting thing behind this is actually a lot of these are becoming a lot less important day to day as I use the public network or I'm out and about doing stuff with my EV charge point now, because of the fact that most DC fast charge points at this point in time are now operating in an aspect of having tap and charge, which is there is a pay point on the charge point itself, and in particular Circle K. Even though I'm showing Circle K here on the right hand side, Circle K have no app to initiate a charge on one of their DC fast charge points. So you arrive at one of their charge points, you would unplug the CHAdeMO connector, plug it into your vehicle, or CHAdeMO or CCS, plug it into your vehicle. You would then tell it which one you're using. It would ask you to authenticate with your credit card. So you tap your credit card to the pay point and the vehicle starts charging. It's very simple in that regard. It is in many ways a much nicer aspect than apps, because sometimes apps can be a little bit slow to respond, or it's trying to see what's going on to it. So it is a much smoother way of doing things when it works that way. And then similarly, when it comes to the end of your charge, you would tap your credit card again and you can hit stop and disconnect your vehicle at that point in time. Now, sometimes it doesn't do what is known as the handshake correctly with the vehicle. So this is the bit where when you plug in the charge point to the vehicle and you tap your credit card to start the charge, there is what's known as a handshake, which is the communication between the charger and your vehicle. And at that point in time, sometimes it doesn't work. Now, is that an issue? No, except for the fact that depending on the charge point operator, there are varying levels of a hold that is put on the account for each time that you would connect. So some of them are 30 euros, some of them are 10 euros, some of them are 50 euros. So depending on which one it is, it can be an expensive hold that sits in your account. Now, money comes back, but if you imagine if you try plugging your vehicle and it doesn't start the charge when it's supposed to because of whatever has happened on the handshake at that point in time, you are looking at something that is 50 euros that's gone from your account, and you have to do the same again to get it to actually go on the next one. So that's where it can be a little bit frustrating at times when people are looking at using these public charging networks, is the cost that can be seen with these things. It comes back to you, but if it goes wrong twice and it operates in the third time, it's still 100 euros of pre-authorization that is sitting there that takes a couple of days to come back depending on what it is. Some banks and some setups are better I think off the top of my head, I've seen people in comments say the likes of Revolut or some of those more fintech banking operators are better, comes back quicker. Some of them are slower. It can be a bit of a hit and miss at times. But again, the big point here is I would say half of these apps I don't use anymore because the operators are getting with the tap and charge. Plug and charge is also coming as well. So this is the ability where your payment details are within the vehicle. So Tesla have done this for many years. So Tesla have it insofar as the payment is associated with the vehicle. So as soon as you plug in your vehicle, it knows the vehicle, it knows the payment details, and it just starts charging. The standards are coming that is going to come for all vehicles. So again, it's going to get better and better in that regard. But the thing here is apps were a big thing and were quite prevalent and everywhere when you needed to charge. It was almost like every charge point you went to needed a new app for each one. And it was very frustrating in that regard as it was a number of years ago. But it is getting much better at this point in time. So as I say, about half of these are at the point, and all in terms of DC fast charging are at the point where you don't need an app to operate them. So Circle K, Apple Green, etc., ESB, eCars and ePower and Weave, all I'm showing here, all will operate with a credit card at the machine on a DC fast charge point. You take the ESB eCar and using it on the AC charge point, you will still need the app at that point in time where you plug in your cable that is in the vehicle and bring with you instead of the DC fast charge point cable that is affixed to the unit at that point in time. So to be aware that there is and can be a lot of apps, but it is getting better in that regard as to how many are required and what you would need to have. So I suppose for people, if you have questions on that or things they're not sure about there, to shout. But for the most part, typically what you would see is you would have one for your vehicle. So my Citroen there in the center on left for my vehicle. I have Car Scanner because I use it to track what's going on with the battery state of health, but also it's an interest of things for me to be able to see what's going on for others. So I can scan vehicles and actually see what's going on in the battery. And or things like your charge point at your home. So there may be an app for that as well. They would be, we'll say, maybe the minimum ones that you would need, maybe one or two charge point operators after that you will regularly use. That may be quite useful in that regard. So moving on from that, maximizing range. What do you need to do to maximize the range of your EV when you get into it and you're starting out in it? And particularly this time of year, it's quite cold, it's wet, it's windy. We've seen a lot of rain and poor weather on the east coast of the country at the minute. So what do you need to maximize the range when you're driving an EV? So this is what you will be told you need. You need a hat and some gloves. Now, I will caveat and say, if you see me driving my EV, I'm wearing a hat, but I wear a hat an awful lot of the time. So it's not because it's cold, it's because of the fact that it is something I'm just going to wear a hat. So you don't need it. This was something that maybe you needed 5-10 years ago with a first gen Nissan Leaf, which had a 24 kilowatt hour battery that had maybe 100 kilometers of range. And in the depths of winter, yes, you probably needed it at that point in time. At the minute, when you look at the vehicles that are coming nowadays, even in the affordable aspects, when you Hyundai Insta or Citroen EC3, it's 200, 300 kilometers of range. It's a lot better in that regard. So the range is a lot better in that aspect. So what does it actually look like in range and what is it like in the real world? So very lucky last year to be on stage with Stale from the Norwegian EV Association and have a conversation with him about cold weather and what was going on there. So these are actually two photos from the presentation that Stale had done back in November. And the interesting thing behind this is they have a lot more cold weather and colder than we get here. So the big thing here, and what do you need to know about your EV and looking at things here? So one, I'm going to explain what's going on in the photo. So they're testing EVs in the top left and bringing them onto many places and big long journeys and seeing what's going on. They test DC fast charging. They test how they operate with heating, coverage and long distance and snow, the range, all those sorts of things. And then on the bottom right, what's quite interesting here is this is a Kia EV9 and a Caravan. They left their house. Stale left his house with the caravan on the back of the EV9, drove up to the mountains, about 100 and something kilometers up in the mountains. He camped overnight using the vehicle to load of the vehicle to run the caravan overnight. So he was warm in the caravan himself while he was driving, but warm in the vehicle itself because he uses heating, and then was able to drive home all without having to charge on that journey to and from. So that's the power of what is going on there in that regard. So quite an interesting view of things where we would possibly think how useful is an EV in winter, and they're going camping in the winter in their electric vehicle, making the dinner comfortable overnight with the heater running, etc., etc. So quite an interesting aspect. Good evening, Patrick White. Thank you very much for joining us. Pleasure to have you. So yes, very interesting in that regard. So what does it mean for us here? Preheating is the big thing that I would talk about first here, and it's the most important aspect. So preheating the battery if you're driving to a charge point to DC fast charge. So that gets the battery in the optimum temperature for what it is for when you're going to charge the vehicle. The next one is actually talking about preheating of the vehicle for when you leave home in the morning time. So one of the, I suppose, nice aspects of an EV that isn't found with petrol or diesel vehicles is actually setting charging timers and heating timers. Charging timers being, you can set the vehicle to charge overnight, but with that, a heating timer to have the vehicle ready to go in the morning. So our first Nissan Leaf and two Nissan Leafs as we had them, we used to set them up to charge overnight. And we also had a timer set on it to be leaving the house at 10 to 8 in the morning. And with that, the vehicle would heat up to 22, 23 degrees, and any snow, ice, etc. would have melted off of the vehicle. The heated seats would have been on, the heated steering wheel would have been on, and you would literally walk out of the door of your house and get into a vehicle that was fully defrosted and warm on the interior, which was a lovely thing to be able to do, all the while plugged in at your charge point, in the case as we were doing it here, and you had 100% battery leaving the house. So it was a very useful way of getting a vehicle ready to leave first thing in the morning in the worst of winter, and then being able to go and do all of your journeys and go that way. With that as well, a lot of going back to the apps, you have the ability and a lot of them to be able to preheat remotely. So if you were in work, again, leaving to go home and it had gotten cold throughout the day and there was possibly frost on the vehicle, you could set preheating from your desk and then come out 10, 15 minutes later and have the vehicle ready to go. Now, that case, it's going to use a bit of energy if you're not on a charge point, but it is an interesting one at that point in time to be able to say what is going on from that perspective. So preheating is an important aspect. Understand how it operates in your vehicle, whether it's there or not as well. Check it. So certain vehicles don't have it. I know my current Citroen van doesn't have it in the spec that we have. It only was the very, very top trim that had the upper spec radio that actually got the additional bit of preheat and charging timing with it. So you do need to know what the vehicle you have is as well. But typically, even without that, we plug our Citroen out in the morning time, and even if in the colder weather, it's turning on the vehicle straight away and using the heat at that point in time off the charger to get it running. For us, it's still much quicker because it's instantaneous heat to defrost the vehicle. So yes, you're still waiting that 5 to 6 minutes to get a vehicle cleared and get moving. But in that case, you're talking about getting a vehicle up and moving at that stage with much faster than you would petrol or diesel. Sometimes diesel doesn't heat up for 20 minutes, half an hour, or until you're moving. So very different aspects. So no scraping, no pulling and dragging at the vehicle at that stage. So quite interesting that way for what people can do. So good question coming in here. Is there any appetite for an Irish homegrown charging app that will aggregate all DC chargers into one app and have a single payment interface? Chris, very good question. So the short answer to that is actually this needs to come through ZEVI and the AFIR directive. So by 2027, at some stage, I think it could be early 2027 or mid 2027 at the latest, we are looking at the fact that all DC chargers need to be understood and perfectly available. And actually, I could be wrong. It could be earlier, but I'll double check on that. But we are looking at the aspect of everything being in a single point of location. So getting away from maps is almost the way I would put it, insofar as Google Maps, Waze, Apple Maps, etc. will all have all of that information in there. It will have all of the pricing information. It will have availability. So if you're driving from Limerick, where I am, to Dublin, it should be the case where I can hop on the motorway, get going, and then I can type as I'm driving, or use voice assistant, say find a charge point on the way, and it can tell me that there are 6 free in Moneygall that I'm passing in a minute, or Portlaoise, or wherever, and tell me that pricing is there, or I can see it on the CarPlay, for argument's sake, as I'm going. So there may be a use for that, or it could be something to look at. We think at this point, where the Norwegian EV Association and the Danish organizations in other countries, they have gotten ahead and done this because it was very much required. It possibly isn't as ideal a situation here in Ireland, because it's probably not as useful, given what is coming with AFIR and what has to be done in the next couple of months and a year. Gamer Trojan, speaking of chargers, have you seen or heard of Tesco and Type 2 under car park areas? New places in Drogheda M1 have about 40 slots to park and connect to a Type 2 pole. Yeah, I've seen a couple of Tesco's that do have Type 2s, but in very small numbers. 40 slots is quite a significant upgrade, and it is what needs to be done in a lot of places. So people are typically coming to the shops to be there for an hour, or if you're going to the larger shopping centres where it's quite big, you take Dundrum, for argument's sake, people are going to be there for a lot longer than an hour typically. So a lot of AC makes a lot of sense there. Again, 2027 building regulations, EU building regulations are coming, where if there's retrofits going on in buildings and sites, there is a lot more requirements on them to actually put in AC charging and cabling, ducting ready to go. And new builds from next year on will have a lot in it as well, from that perspective, to actually put it in place that any new builds 2027 on are actually already there with, I think 10% is the minimum, but you could be higher, and trunking for all parking spaces is what's going to come in the next short period of time as well. So yeah, quite an interesting one and good to see. Moving on then, EV etiquette, and what is EV etiquette? What do you need to know? So there's a couple of things to talk about here. I suppose first thing to say is EV charge points and where they are not parking locations. So that's one of the big things that we see kind of, I suppose, aggravation, I suppose, for people, because the infrastructure needs to be more. There needs to be more chargers, but it's the type thing where you can turn up at a charge point and something is parking in the vehicle bay for charging, not actually charging. So it's quite frustrating for people. So the first thing I say is big no parking sign. Don't park if you're not charging. Use is what it is. The next thing I would say is to pay here in the top right hand side is to be aware of how much it costs or may cost to charge and park where you are. So different county councils, different locations have different fees and or no fees at all. So actually in Limerick, for argument's sake, where I am, I know the first 4 hours are free for parking and you pay for the next 2 hours, but at 6 hours you have to move the vehicle on. So there's effectively a 6 hour limit on charging on an AC charge point within Limerick city and county. Whereas in most places in Dublin, for argument's sake, you have to pay for your parking if you're on street from time zero. There is no leeway of time. So you need to be aware of that from where you are. So to be aware of it, understand that. The other thing is, as I hear the severity and priority in the top left-hand corner here, is actually looking at the fact that EV etiquette is around the fact that if there is an issue, to report it. We can help at times when there are issues, but if there's something on a site that is wrong, it's important to highlight it there and then to either the charge point operator where possible or the site owner, be that county council, be it a fuel court provider, etc. Make them aware of what is going on and make it vocal to them, because we can reach out and have the conversations as well, but without actually the ongoing pressure that needs to be done with them in certain locations, it can be very hard to get this to be a bit better. I would say Circle K in Fermoy at times can be quite tough, that you can turn up there and there can be a number of vehicles that are petrol and diesel just sitting in the EV charge points because they're very close to the door. Typically, it's not too much of an issue for charging at that point when I've used it, but it is the type thing where there are times where you could turn up there and you could be kind of asking a vehicle to move because of what it is. The other thing to think about then as well with DC fast charge points, actually the 45-minute rule that our 45-minute overstay fee that kicks in a lot of charge point operators is actually kind of based on a bit of science, let's just say, or the default way of a vehicle operating. So on the bottom here is a charge curve for the Volkswagen ID4 Pro 82 kilowatt hour. And the big thing to show here is it stays very flat for a long period of time. And then just over 70%, it starts to drop and come off the other side. And this is where a lot of commentary will come from to say to charge to 80% in the DC fast charger in particular is the length of time it takes you to charge from 80% up is considerably longer versus what it is to get from the 10 to 80% in the first place. So you could be 25 minutes, a half an hour to get from 10 to 80%. You could spend another 25 minutes to get from 80% to 95%, depending on how this curve drops off on the edge. So it is important to be aware of that, but also it is the type of aspect that we are at the point in time where the charging network is getting to the point where you can typically charge in a big battery like this 82 kilowatt hours. 10 to 80% is probably going to give you 200 and something kilometers of range. You don't need to typically push it to get to a higher percentage state of charge to get you to where you need to be. And oftentimes it is quicker to pick up and go. So again, the drive slow to go fast adage was an important part of EVs in the earlier days, where the charging curves on the vehicles and how much power they could take was not that good. So you were talking about sub 100 kilowatt charging, and maybe even at the 125, 130 kilowatts, it's not quite there. But when you were below that point, even hopping on the motorway and driving at 120 kilometers an hour, you would chew through the battery quite fast. When you look at, again, Xpeng G6 as the example, as what we're talking about 5C charging, that vehicle at a motorway speed for 2 hours will get you, 200 and something kilometers up the road. To pull in and charge on a 350 kilowatt charger will probably take you 5 and definitely less than 10 minutes to put back in 200 kilometers of range. So my little Hyundai Ioniq 28 kilowatt hour original, the saloon version of it, so 2018, I can't do that in that vehicle because it only charges at 68 kilowatts. So I would have to drive slower to do that 200 kilometers. It would take me longer to charge to then try come back and do the return journey. So it is getting to the point where charging above 80% just doesn't give as much of a benefit unless you absolutely need to. If there's nobody there at the charge point and it's another 5 minutes and you haven't hit an overstay fee, again, I've been at charge points where I've gone to 90, 95% because there's nobody waiting. I was, sitting in a restaurant and I could see it outside the window where there was nobody there, middle of the day. And the 95%, that little extra bit that I was putting into the vehicle was enough to get me home at that point in time. So yes, it's not to say don't do it ever, but it is the type thing where things are getting much better with charging curves, but also with the power of the vehicles and how, close together charge points are actually getting, that you probably don't need to. Now, again, vehicle specific, do check that and see what's going on there. But it is an aspect of that it is getting much better in that regard. So community support, and this is kind of the last section that we have, and it's not a big section, so a small bit. So, to close out on that EV etiquette, it's a big thing. It's to be nice and to people. It's a simple thing. Most people are going to be nice, and actually it's a really nice aspect when you do turn up a charge point. People are quite open to talking. You're able to see what other people vehicles they have, what they're living with, how they find it, etc., etc. So it has been a great kind of community aspect for many years, but it is the type thing where as more people are coming on board with EVs and buying them, and we're hopefully going to see a very good month out of this month for January of 2026. We're hoping for good results there. It does become the aspect of understanding that and working together and being, considerate to other people is what's going to be required. As the network is increasing, it was 40% up on CCS chargers last year. We're going to see a significant increase on DC fast charging and AC as well. We hope to see as well this year. So there is a lot to come as well. So it is getting better all the time. But part of the issue is infrastructure. It does need to get better, and that's what we're working as as an association is to keep that moving and make sure that people are aware of that, but also to do the best we can with what is there in the time being. With that, if you are a new EV owner, on the Irish EV Association page, there is a new EV Owner's Guide. This was done in collaboration with the SEAI, and it is available on both their page and ours, where it is a PDF that you can download. So if you're watching now and you're interested in looking at that, the QR code that is there should bring you straight to it as well. And again, there is a lot of resources on SEAI to understand what's there. So the grants on the vehicles, the grants on the home charger. And the important thing to there is the grants on the home charger is something that you will look after yourself when the charger has been installed. The grants on the vehicle will all be looked after by the OEM and the dealership when you are purchasing the vehicle. So that's all done in the background for you and as to what you see and what's done there. But this is a lovely little quick short guide for people to look at. And again, we have the new EV Owner's Guide with a bit more detail and a lot more of the jargon that's there. So AC, DC, CHAdeMO, Type 2, CCS, all that sort of information is there. The likes of vehicle to load, vehicle to grid, and all these other technologies are there to give a kind of quick overview for people that it is coming in. I always use the example is when you are driving petrol and diesel for many years, you don't remember who taught you to fill up that car. None of us really remember that, I would say, unless it was last year. So if you're driving for 20 years, you probably don't remember the time when you filled up the car for the first time. Even if you are a petrol head, you probably don't remember that. An EV is different, so you need to learn how to do it again. And it is a little bit of a kind of, well, what am I doing here? So it is the type thing where you do need to take the time and ask the question and see what's going on. So something like this is a guide, and something like what is around on our association and people that are around it is the important aspect. So with that, the Irish EV Association.ie has a ton of information. There, as you can see here, the news, we put out our articles and information as to keep it available for people to know what's going on. But under the ownership, there's a lot of information under the ownership tab. Under the members guide, they're signing up for membership if you want to support us or get the we have an email newsletter that we try and keep coming out as consistently as possible and trying to bring that about. But then with vehicles and events to see what's going on there. So, you know, Derek from Nevo will do a lot of the videos that are going to show you what the vehicles are like. That's a fantastic resource, same as with other, you know, reviewers and people that are out there. And again, it's important to know what you're buying. Does it suit you? So again, our contact details are there as well to send us an email and ask the question. But again, the Facebook group, our Instagram, our Facebook, Instagram, I think X as it is, Blue Sky, we have a lot of social media. So to reach out to us in many of those aspects and see what your questions are, there is a lot of information available for people in that regard. So that brings us to the end of the info circuit as we look at it here this evening. So the big thing there is to say, if you're buying a new vehicle, be it new or secondhand, this is the information that you might want if you haven't looked at this before or seen it before. So it is the hopefully something you can look back on and review on. But again, if you're not sure, send us the email, ask us the question. We are there to help as well in that regard. And come to us. We are more than happy to chat. Again, we have EV meetups throughout the year. So it is also a great time if you haven't purchased yet and you're thinking about it, come along to one of those. So keep an eye out for those as they come up throughout the year. We aim to keep and get to the different places. And there's always a number of committee members as well as other new EV owners, but also existing members that have been there for many years as well. So that it's a great wealth of information, and it is the type thing to come along and ask those questions. As such, that is it. If you have questions, as I say, come back to us. Thank you for everybody that has contributed to the chat here this evening with your comments. Greatly appreciated. So thank you. We will see you again on the next episode. We're working in the background, trying to get a few more bits that are useful for people and will be an interesting one. Never mind just information, but interesting. We're working on the interesting ones to come. But with this being January 2026, and we're hoping for quite a good month, as I say, for new EV sales to come along. We felt it was important to have this conversation here this evening for what is going on for people that are buying an EV. So Thank you very much. We will see you all on the next episode.